This is Glow in the Dark Radio. The science fiction podcast with original independent science fiction written and performed by Mike Luoma, with music by Kevin MacLeod. The Vatican Assassin Trilogy and The Adventures of Alibi Jones by Mike Luoma are available in ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook wherever you find your books online. Get links and details at glowinthedarkradio.com. This is the Science Fiction Podcast, Glow in the Dark Radio. I'm your host, your writer and reader, Mike Luoma, and I've got part 2 of Chapter 19 of the original novel Alibi Jones, part of the Chronological Omnibus, as we head through this episode of Glow in the Dark Radio. Alibi about to get the top of his head taken off. That's where we left him anyway. Pretty good cliffhanger at the end of the last episode. Alibi Jones is in captivity, and as I said, an ancient alien is preparing to saw off the top of his skull. He's had better days, but he's also recently had a mental or maybe spiritual encounter with an essence that was kind of like his father, BC, the Vatican Assassin, who Alibi told to fuck off, because that's, where he's coming from. But at any rate, that essence taught Alibi the mental trick of closing his mind to mental assault through visualizing 2 big, heavy wooden double doors closing and locking. Double doors. And Azhumet confirmed not only that he's a time-traveling ancient enemy, but he also seemed to suggest there could be more on the way. Not that this matters currently to Alibi, because he's about to get his top of his head taken off. Of course, that's why Azhumet didn't mind telling Alibi all this, as he's got him, strapped to the table and paralyzed, and he's shaved his head, he's painted him up, all prepared to take off the top of Alibi's skull so he can experiment on Alibi and chart his brain's reactions as Alibi dies and after his death. So, yeah, Alibi has had better days. We'll see what happens coming up in part 2 of Chapter 19 of Alibi Jones on this episode of Glow in the Dark Radio. Not a lot of book news at the moment. Kind of a quiet time of year. A lot of stuff in the works, but I don't want to talk about it because I've learned if I talk about it, things don't always happen. So I got to keep them to myself and make them happen instead of talking about them and dissipating the energy, if that makes any kind of sense. So I'm not going to talk about what's in the works. There's stuff going on, but right now kind of a quiet time. A time for me to say thank you. If you're a patron, I've got a handful of people who support the podcast and do so for $2, $5, or $10 a month. And I have that set up at Patreon, Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio, you can become a patron and help support the podcast. And again, I've got tiers, different levels, $2, $5, or $10 a month. It's up to you. $2 is just kind of a sustaining thing, but if you're at the $5 and $10 level, you sometimes get stuff. Like I've given patrons early episodes. This episode should be early for patrons. I hope you got it early. Patrons are so far the only people who have heard my short story, Ajar. Gave that to patrons for Halloween last year. Also gave patrons a digital copy of the comic book, or the graphic novel, of Alibi Jones's comic book adventures, all collected, the Chronological Omnibus, which just came out end of last year, beginning of this year. So there are benefits besides, feeling good for helping out the podcast. So if you want to become a patron, again, the place to go is patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio. And again, my heartfelt thanks to those of you who do support the podcast and help keep this all going. We're going to get into part 2 of chapter 19 of the original novel, Alibi Jones, coming up next on Glow in the Dark Radio.
"50 years ago, Mira, humankind's last hope to find new resources, departed the solar system. 7 years into her mission, she disappeared. She has returned. SNR Black, a Sol Federation Marine Corps vessel, is sent to retrieve her from certain destruction in the Kuiper Belt beyond Pluto. What they find will change humankind forever." From Parsec award-winning author Paul E. Cooley, Derelict, Marines, Part 1 of the Derelict Saga, combines military sci-fi, space opera, mystery, and suspense to create a journey you won't forget. Podcast available at shadowpublications.com. Paperback and ebook available from amazon.com. Some mysteries shouldn't be solved.
Now here's part 2 of chapter 19 of Alibi Jones on Glow in the Dark Radio. Azhumet appears in Alibi's line of sight once again, and Eldred stands next to him, surgical saw in its hands, the blade spinning and whirring. Azhumet straps on safety goggles and then holds out his hand to the Eldred. It places the saw in his hand. Azhumet then disappears out of Alibi's sight as he prepares to take off the top of Alibi's head. The sound of the saw grows louder and higher in pitch as Azhumet prepares to slice through Alibi's skull. Will I feel it as he starts cutting? Alibi closes his eyes. It doesn't help. He can still hear the saw. Then he hears something else. Pshaw! Bam! A loud explosion of thunder drowns out the sound of the saw. What was that? Azhumet shouts out the question. Kacha! Azhumet yells at the Eldred. The Tekta report engaging ships in orbit, an Eldred informs Azhumet. It appears other ships have broken past their defenses. Those ships are approaching this installation. Our Eldred ships are attempting to stop them. The saw grinds to silence as it's turned off. On the very edge of his vision, Alibi sees Azhumet call the Tekta.
We have engaged Solar Alliance forces, Azhumet. We are running interference to prevent them from landing,
the Tekta informs him. They are already landing, you idiot! Azhumet yells at the Tekta.
We are outnumbered and under heavy fire, Azhumet. We will hold out for you while we can, but I am afraid that will not be for much longer,
the Tekta tells Azhumet.
Kaboom!
The ground shakes. Kata, report! Azhumet commands a nearby Eldred. A safe ship has landed inside the installation. It appears a Dakhur cruiser has landed as well. We are moving to engage forces now, sir, the Eldred tells Azhumet. Take 2 other servants and begin routing all power to my machine. I want it up and running, now! Yes, sir. Azhumet reappears in Alibi's sight. He draws a pistol from his belt. Azhumet points the gun at Alibi's head. Alibi tries to think hard at Azhumet. What are you doing? Going ahead in time? Running away? If I must, Azhumet answers his unspoken question. It is a contingency plan, yet again. A wise man makes sure all of his options are ready, open and available. I always give myself the opportunity to jump ahead in time, into another body. Should I need to. Into what body? Mine? Do not flatter yourself, Azhumet says with a laugh. I have no desire to inhabit one of your race's forms ever again. So limited human flesh. No, I have created other bodies. Bodies like this one I am in now. Not perfect, but better than yours. Unfortunately, it is much shorter lived. So I continue to perfect the form. That is what I have been trying to do. Trying to extract traces of our DNA from your human DNA. Retrieving our markers from your polluted streams. To grow proper forms, proper bodies for us to reside inside. I've extracted some very interesting DNA from you, Alibi Jones. Your blood has helped me immensely. Your biology will actually help my next batch of forms grow stronger, last longer. I have other bodies ready in other places like this one, other servants at work in other laboratories. And thanks in part to you, I will soon once again live in a true body of the race. It appears now is not the time for surgery, however. I will have to settle for what I have already harvested from you. I am tempted to take you with me, keep you alive for further study. But you are too dangerous. I have your DNA, but I no longer have any use for you. Not anymore. Azhumet brings the gun up next to Alibi's head. Alibi can feel the cold barrel tickle the back of his ear. Alibi is blinded by a flash of red light. Am I dead? He can smell burnt flesh. He's awake and alive. Ah! Azhumet curses. Alibi blinks. He sees Azhumet cradling a burnt stump where his right hand used to be. Someone shot the gun out of Azhumet's hand. Something else occurs to Alibi. He can feel his toes moving. The muscle relaxant may be starting to wear off. He tries to move his fingers, or his head. His head shifts slightly, and he can see safe troopers across the lab, shooting in his direction. Alibi spots Kit among the troopers in the doorway.
The Tekta ships in orbit have surrendered, sir,
and Eldred reports to Azhumet, standing next to Alibi.
They have been disabled. One of our Eldred ships has been destroyed. The other fight's on.
Tell the other Eldred ship to retreat and await further orders at one of our emergency rendezvous points. Azhumet yells another command out to the Eldred, but Alibi can't understand his words. They stop fighting. Azhumet holds up both of his arms, his good one and his smoking stump. He calls to Kit and the safe troopers. We give up! Don't shoot! I give up! The troopers come up on Azhumet quickly, guns trained. Kit approaches and sees Alibi stretched out and wired up on the gurney. Alibi? Kit wonders. Then he realizes it is his friend. Alibi! He turns to Azhumet. What have you done to him? Nothing, Azhumet answers. Muscle relaxant. You rudely interrupted my brain surgery before it could get started. Azhumet looks around the laboratory. Alibi wonders where the machine is revving up. It has to be somewhere nearby. I wish I could tell Kit and the safe troopers about the machine. Alibi tries to talk, but his mouth just won't move. Azhumet shoots a look at Alibi. When he sees that Alibi is still paralyzed, he smiles. Ba-whoop, ba-whoop, ba-whoop. The comm alarm of one of the safe troopers goes off. Oh, we've got a shitload of Tekta ships showing upstairs, the safe officer tells Kit. Azhumet grins. No, wait! The trooper sounds hopeful. They say they're not Tekta! The screens around them, on every piece of equipment, flicker to life. What looks like a Tekta appears.
We are broadcasting in all languages, on all known communication frequencies.
A voice begins, a slithering tongue translated simultaneously.
We are the Sarta of the Greater Ta. We have assumed the responsibility for the Tekta and all their territories, as they have once again violated the terms of the Greater Ta. Our friends the Dakhur brought this to our attention. For this, we thank them. As the administrators of the territories of the Greater Ta, we will soon be in communication with the Solar Alliance to discuss terms of annexation and other territorial concerns. All Tekta ships are now hereby declared to be under the control of the Sarta. Any ships continuing to operate as Tekta ships are therefore renegades and can be destroyed upon contact without fear of retribution by the Greater Ta.
With that, the screens go blank. Shit! The officer among the safe troopers exclaims, Where'd he go? Azhumet disappeared while they were listening to the Sarta. Kit and Alibi hear the same sound they remember from back on the planetoid, a humming drone like a billion bees rubbing their wings together. Azhumet has turned on his machine. The hair rises up off the skin of the humans and aliens as electric tension crackles around them. Static energy fills the air and then is just as suddenly gone. Nearly frozen by the ozone, the safe troopers shake off the effects and begin scrambling, looking for Azhumet as the energy subsides. "Over here!" one calls out. "He's inside some kind of tank or something." "Don't touch it," the safe officer orders. Alibi can feel his fingers and toes when he wiggles them. He also feels sort of high. Something in the muscle relaxant, probably. The tubes in his throat begin to choke him as he realizes he can feel them, too. He tries to move, but still can't do more than twitch a little. Kit seems to understand as he comes back over to Alibi.
"How are you?"
the Catman asks him. Alibi tries to answer, but only manages muffled moans past the tubing.
"I am going to risk taking these things out of you,"
Kit says, and he tries to gingerly pull the tubes out of Alibi's throat. Alibi chokes as they come out, coughing up phlegm and gasping for breath. Kit backs away from the table. Tubes out, Alibi tries to breathe. Finally, he manages to whisper a couple of words.
"Thank you,"
Alibi says softly. He tries to move, leaning up onto one side. The movement makes him cough again. He hacks up more mucus, spits on the ground next to the gurney. Kit deftly avoids getting mucked on.
"You are welcome."
"Nice haircut," Kit jokes. "You are also quite red. Is that right?" "Probably not," Alibi manages. "Maybe it's my metabolism churning to burn that shit out of my system." Alibi tries to sit up. Sensor wires cling to his chest and hold him back. A little more effort from him and two of the sensors rip off his skin, setting him free. "Ouch!" Alibi barks. He pulls the rest of the sensors off with a sweep of his half-numb right arm and swings his legs over the side of the operating table, trying to stand up. Alibi's legs are apparently made of licorice. They fold up under him and he falls to the floor. Kit tries to help him back up. Alibi attempts to get his legs to hold him, leaning on the nearby table for support. "Damn, he paralyzed me with some drug, Kit. This sucks," Alibi tries to say, but the words slur out mangled from his barely functioning mouth. He tries willing his legs to work. "It's everything we feared and more, buddy," he tells Kit, words growing clearer. "This guy Azhumet is one of them. He's one of the ancient enemy. These machines of his move him forward in time, into bodies he's growing. And he made it sound like there are more of them on the way."
"Well, at least the Tech-Ta will no longer be supporting him," Kit says. "Not officially, anyway. And I do not believe the Greater Ta will abide his presence in their expanses."
"Maybe, maybe not. Don't really know the Sarta," Alibi notes.
"The Dakhur have had many dealings with them," Kit says. "We have found them to be honest and honorable. The Greater Ta is much different than the Tech-Ta."
"That'll be a refreshing change," Alibi says. He pushes off the table and tries to stand. He stays up, although he's unsteady. A safe officer approaches. "Alibi Jones?" "I'm Alibi Jones," he replies. "I guess you are in charge here," the safe officer tells him. "Sir?" "Oh?" "Yes, sir. According to my orders from Safe Command, you're the man. We're mopping up now. We rounded up all the little fuzzy guys that were running around, but it's the damnedest thing, sir. As soon as we get them in captivity, they fade from their blue color to gray, and then they die. Don't know if any of them will be left alive." "Would have been nice to bring a living one with us." "We'll bring the bodies back, then. I'm sure the project will want to examine them," Alibi says. "Yes, sir. We're doing that. That's what Mr. Kit told us to do." Alibi looks over at Kit appreciatively. He nods.
"It was why we came out here,"
Kit points out. "Thank you," Alibi replies. He tries walking, tests his balance and the strength of his legs. "Where's Azhumet's machine?" he asks Kit.
"Over there,"
Kit answers him, pointing across the lab. He turns and leads the way. Alibi follows slowly behind him. This machine looks different from the one they saw on the planetoid, more spread out. Like a Kit version, Alibi says.
"A what? A like-me version?"
Kit asks. "No, like built from a Kit, prefab. It's all spread out, and look, no door," Alibi notes, pointing at the square transparent tank in front of them. The tank is made out of 4 large, flat, rectangular clear panels, sealed down their long edges. Azhumet evidently climbed a small scaffolding and lowered himself down into the tank. Now the body that had been occupied by Azhumet's consciousness lies on the floor of the glass tank, its face mushed up against the glass, drooling. "Officer," Alibi calls over to the safe trooper, "let's be sure we bring this poor thing back with us, too. I'm sure the project will want to study him. Just a big brain-dead baby at this point, Alibi says. He's not Azhumet anymore. Azhumet got away. Maybe he missed his target, Kit offers. Blasted himself off into space. That would be nice, but he's not stupid, Alibi answers. Besides, I think he'd still find his way into somebody. Some body? The way he did with Masakov originally. If I understand Krish, that's what happened, somewhere out there in deep space. Yes, you have a point, Kit agrees. He had no target when he came 1,000,000 years into the future. I do not believe he would have deliberately chosen Dmitri Masakov. I wonder how long he's been here, Alibi muses. We can probably assume it was sometime after the last war and the death of the Eldred, or else the Eldred would not have died out, Kit deduces. He looks around the lab. This situation appears to be under control. Kit makes to leave. Alibi, it is good to see you in one piece, even if you do look strange without your hair, and with blue paint on your head. Thanks, Kit. You're leaving? I am. I must get the ship I borrowed back to the Dakhur homeworld. I called in a bit of a favor, but I will see you soon. Oh, really? How's that? Your Aunt Anita promised me dinner if I rescued you, Kit explains. I do plan on collecting my reward. The Catman hisses laughter. I called her when I got away. She provided the safe squadron. Good old Aunt Anita. Well, thanks to you both, I got to keep my head, Alibi says with a smile. He touches his now-shaved scalp and pulls his fingers away wet. Still wet. His fingertips are covered with blue paint. So, Kit, see you back on Series Central? You will, indeed. Until then, be well, Alibi, Kit says. He turns and heads off across the lab and out the door. Trooper, could you help me? He calls over to the safe officer. The officer comes to Alibi's aid and helps him limp out towards a waiting safe ship. You should have seen all those Sartar ships, the safe officer says to Alibi as he helps him along. There were more on the tactical display than I could count. We were way outnumbered. When they first arrived and we thought they were Tekta, I thought we were toast. They made short work of the 2 Tekta that were in orbit. They were already disabled, but the Sartar just blew them away. No kidding around. I didn't realize they'd destroyed those Tekta ships, Alibi admits. Oh yeah, the safe officer exclaims. Speaking of ships, did you see the one your Catman friend came in? I didn't, no. Pretty damn sweet. Don't get to see very many Dakhur Imperial Elite cruisers. They don't come out our way, you know. Thought those were just used by their royal family, but I could be wrong. We don't really know that much about the Dakhur, do we? I guess maybe we don't. No, we really don't know that much, Alibi agrees with the man. And I seem to know less and less about the one Dakhur I thought I knew. Well, glad we could get you out in one piece, Mr. Jones, the trooper says as they reach a safe ship. Thank you, officer. Thank you very much. Alibi limps onto the bridge of the Stinger ship for what he hopes is an uneventful trip back to Ceres Central. That was part 2 of Chapter 19 of Alibi Jones on Glow-in-the-Dark Radio. Well, Azhumet seems to have time-traveled again and switched bodies, getting away. He's still a threat, on the loose, with who knows how many other installations at his disposal. He made it sound like he had a few. At least a couple different bases. And now the Tekta's bosses seem to have arrived. The Sarta, representing the Greater Ta. And Kit seemed to know about this. The Sartar mentioned the Greater Ta taking over Tekta space, and for the need to discuss annexation and other territorial concerns, which sounded a bit ominous. So we'll have to see what develops in Chapter 20 on our next episode of Glow-in-the-Dark Radio. Big thanks again to patrons who are getting this episode early. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you'd like to become a patron, I would love to have your support for $2, $5, or $10 a month. And you can do that at patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio. Help out the podcast and If you're at the $5 or $10 level, getting some free stuff along the way too. Early episodes, short stories nobody else has heard, free digital copies of graphic novels, things like that. Just talking about recently. So again, get in on all that at patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio, or just go to my sites and look for the link to Patreon, or follow the link in the show notes. And that is all for this episode. I'm your host, your writer and reader, Mike Luoma. Thank you again for listening to Glow in the Dark Radio. Glow in the Dark Radio. This podcast presentation is copyright 2025 by Michael F. Luoma and is protected under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License, CC by NC-ND 4.0. Music by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at incompetech.com. Mike's books are available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook, wherever you find books online. Get links and more details at glowinthedarkradio.com and mikeluoma.com. This has been a presentation of Glow in the Dark Radio.